This is Wildcat Country.
Larson tipped it. Love has it. Lewis slams it, and Arizona wins it.
The inside scoop on the Arizona Wildcats.
It's Gunnar Maldonado. He's got blockers. Touchdown, Arizona.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's time to bear down.
Welcome to another edition of Wildcat Country presented by Harrah's Auction Casino. Eric Cohn and Shane Dale. And how about this, Shane? Arizona is 10-1 in the Big 12, tied for first place, and I was stinking wrong with everything that I said about this team 2 months ago.
You were wrong about the BYU game too, Eric. And I was, of course, too. That's why I'm mentioning it. I'm glad
it's a great win. It's a great win.
It was. The ASU game, I think, it was one of those rare games where it kind of went the way we expected it to, back and forth. Tough game on the road against a bubble tournament team, and a better team pulled away toward the end. And the same thing kind of happened against BYU, which we didn't necessarily expect, because I think we both think BYU is a tad better, has a better home court advantage, and Arizona won them both, and that not easy to do. I was thinking back, Eric, to Tommy Lloyd's comments after the UCF game, which was a game they won, but not necessarily in a really impressive style. And he called out his team a little bit, in a very methodical way, because Tommy very rarely does that. And, the big comment that I remember is, he said, sometimes players will think things will happen just for them because they're wearing an Arizona uniform, and you got to earn it. And since then, whether it was related to those comments or not, the team has responded. They're number 9 in net, number 11 in Ken Palm, number 12 in Evan Maya, who we had on last week. Unfathomable metrics compared to, where they were two months ago. They got a team coming into McKale that ranks higher than them in all of those categories and is arguably the only team in the conference hotter than they are. Should be a fantastic game, albeit another late start, as we just learned. But it's another one tough test after another for Arizona, and they keep passing them. I love it. And even if they falter down a stretch here and there, I'm fine with it. If this kind of competition doesn't prepare them for March, absolutely nothing will.
Yeah, I think that's true. These TV times are just terrible. I don't understand for the life of me what the Big 12 is doing, putting premium matchups in terrible times.
Yeah. I don't know if they had a choice on this one, but
I had a chance earlier today, Shane, to go on with the AZ12 podcast with Mike Luke. I appreciate that. Thanks, Mike. It was a great time, and I appreciate all the support back and forth if you're listening to both podcasts. And I said, Arizona BYU, Shane, you knew at the start of the year that was going to be an impact game. Mm-hmm. Why is it at 9 o'clock? You knew Iowa State and Arizona before the season, regardless of anything else, was going to be an impact game, and you're putting it at 9 o'clock. That's 11 Eastern. Who comes up with that? Put ASU and Kansas State there, who nobody cares about, except for bettors and the alma maters.
It's kind of a trade-off, because you could either be one of many games on at the same time, or the positive thing with Arizona Iowa State, for example, was it was the only game going on at the time, and it was on ESPN, not ESPN2 or ESPN News or ESPN Plus, on ESPN with Scott Van Pelt's Sports Center following right after. So I agree. I'd rather them be earlier. We talked about this at length the last show, as far as is attendance down at football, and are they struggling to sell out more so now with basketball because of that, or for other reasons? And I don't like it, but you try to look at the positives, and at least that's one of them.
Yeah, but and I know we'll get to buy or sell, and we have a great show. Joe Lopez from the Tortillas Takes podcast, Texas Tech, podcast, going to join us to preview everything Texas Tech and talk about the Arizona Texas Tech budding rivalry that has some interesting layers to it. So we'll get a chance to talk with him in the second segment. We'll talk a little football scheduling in the third segment. With the Big 12 schedule out, God knows what those TV times are going to look like. I thought the Pac-12 had it wrong, Shane, with the whole TV time thing. And I feel like the Big 12 is, making it worse. And my buddy Steve had said he hates the Big 12, and because of that, he called this, and I gotta give him credit. I said, no, they'll be fine. They'll figure it out. Yeah. Shane, these people, what do they do? You and I both worked in TV. We understand how this works. What are we doing?
Yeah, again, and maybe at some point, we've had people who were part of that scheduling process on the podcast before. Maybe we get them back on. We're in the process trying to get Desiree Reed Francois to join us. Could ask her about it as well, but I think it just comes in today's TV world. It comes with being in the Pacific / Mountain time zone. The Arizona time zone, whatever you want to call it, and. It's not, I remember Rich Rodriguez rolling his eyes back in the day. It's like, here we go again, Pac-12 after dark. And, it's just more of the same. And now he's back in West Virginia. He's going to have to travel out to Arizona and Arizona State at some point, which is kind of crazy to think about. And he's probably going to be treated as another one of those midnight specials.
Get into basketball talk here in Buy or Sell number one. Let's get right to it. Shane, after two great wins that we saw this past weekend / week, number one, Arizona will go as far as Caleb Love can take them. Buy or sell?
Got to buy. I think what we've learned about this team is Arizona is talented enough to beat bad to slightly above average teams when Caleb Love doesn't play well, but he needs to be a contributor against better teams, especially in late game situations and in moments where the other team's gaining a lot of momentum. There aren't. We saw that against BYU. He had a big shot to quell a big BYU run in the second half. I did the same against ASU. There aren't a lot of basketball players, both college or pro, who are really willing and able to handle that kind of pressure, who embrace it. Caleb's always willing. It's the able part that's sometimes a problem, right? But yeah, like it or not, as much talent as Arizona has, 1 through 8 on their roster right now, Arizona's NCAA tournament run will very likely be decided by whether we get the good Caleb or the bad Caleb. It's the way it is. In the last 2 games plus the last 502 against Iowa State, he is 12 of 21 from 3-point range. Now, obviously, he's not going to keep up that pace, but if he shoots close to 40% overall, including from 3-point range, which is where his bread and butter is, Arizona could beat anyone. Any given night, he shoots that well, and he's contributing in other ways to his credit as well. He had 12 rebounds and 11 assists on that 2-game road swing, 3 steals and just 4 turnovers. So he's doing a lot of everything. But there's plenty of ways he's contributing, but he has to shoot the ball well, including in late game, especially in late game situations, if Arizona's going to make a deep tournament run. I wish it didn't hinge on him quite as much as that, but I really think it does.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think, but what we said on last week's show, how will the Wildcats respond after the Iowa State game? They could go up to Tempe and not play well and lose, and then BYU, who knows what happens? And they played better than than both of us expected, because we thought they'd lose to BYU.
Yeah.
So Caleb Love was impressive in both games, had 27 points against Arizona State, led the team in scoring once again against BYU. I think that if Caleb Love carries this team, I think they can make a run beyond our reasonable expectations. I think it's almost the opposite of football, where we said, what's the floor for football? And they were, it was like in the basement or below that is where they ended up. And we said, what's the ceiling for basketball? And I think if Caleb Love takes over, as he did in taking North Carolina to the Final Four the other year, I think Arizona could go a lot further than maybe we expect.
Yeah.
Not saying it's going to happen.
No,
I'm just saying
it's all. I mean, as much as Arizona's getting battle tested, it's still luck of the draw in terms of matchups and in terms of does everyone go cold at the same time? One game can still derail your season, but Arizona has a lot of contributors. Carter Bryant and Henry Vasar, they keep getting better from game in, game out. KJ Lewis is great both sides of the ball. Jaden Bradley, I love when Jaden Bradley gets kind of selectively aggressive and takes it to the hoop. I think that's one of their best plays, is just when Jaden Bradley decides to just go out with a burst of speed and challenge whoever's at the rim guarding him. But Caleb Love is, you talk a lot, Eric, about having an alpha. He's still the alpha on this team. And sometimes it doesn't work out for Arizona, and it just comes down to the timing. Is he going to be hot at the right time? And Arizona's got a great supporting cast. They can beat probably all but maybe 15, 20 teams in the country without him playing well. But to beat those teams, including Texas Tech, they need something. They need at least a decent game from Caleb Love.
I would agree with that. Number 2, Shane, this is Tommy Lloyd's best coaching job thus far at Arizona. Buy or sell?
Yeah, it's tough with recency bias, right? But I'm going to lean toward buying it, because I think when you factor in Mo Krivas' injury, because he was a guy who Tommy thought might be Arizona's best player this season. I think you could argue that it is to this point. We still got a ways to go, but specifically you look at Tobe Awaka and Henry Vasar, his staff's ability to develop big men has been phenomenal just in the time he's been here. Awaka's field goal percentage is up a couple points compared to his 2 years at Tennessee. And we weren't even talking about Vasar going into the season, right? Those guys combined for 31 points and 15 rebounds against BYU. Vasar was huge at the end of the ASU game. He had 3 big offensive rebounds in the last few minutes. My favorite sequence in that game against ASU was when Arizona was up 4 with about a minute and a half left. KJ Lewis missed. Vasar, I believe, he tips out the rebound to Caleb Love. Then he comes out all the way out to set a pick, which leaves Jaden Quaintance, who needs to work on his free throw shooting, on Caleb Love. Vasar's got a mismatch under the basket all of a sudden. Love tosses it into him. It's an easy layup. Arizona goes up 6, and that's pretty much the game. Great all-around play in the half court by Vasar. I think in Tommy's first couple of years, you could give some credit to Sean Miller for handing him handing him essentially the keys to some great players like Ben Mathurin, Tubelis, Koloko. But this team is all him. It's all Tommy Lloyd, all his staff. It's a lot of new pieces. They've navigated a key injury, and Arizona's playing as well as they ever have at any point during his time here. So is this the best team he's had? I don't know. We'll have to wait and see. Is this the best coaching job? I would lean to yes at this point.
Okay. I think that's a great take. I think at this point, the fact that Arizona is getting better, Shane, is really important. Like, this is a team that we're seeing improve throughout the season. I don't know if we could say that in previous Tommy Lloyd editions of Arizona.
Yeah.
And maybe it's because the schedule is a lot more difficult than we were used to.
Yeah.
But I don't remember a team getting better like this. I mean, this team I wrote off. I'm not going to blame you for that. I wrote them off. I said they're not going to make the tournament. Yeah. On our last show, the last few shows of 2024, I said they're not making the tournament. They're done. Mm-hmm. And since I said that,
I don't think you were alone in that opinion, but we'll see who admits it.
I mean, I'll own it because a lot of people won't own when they're wrong. You and I do a pretty good job of that.
We definitely do because we're wrong a lot. Yeah.
Well, aren't we all in this business when you talk sports? Arizona, since I said after UCLA, oh, they're done. They've won 12 out of 13, and the only loss was to Texas Tech in a game where they were in it until 2-3 minutes left.
Yeah.
They look like a completely different team. So I'm just saying, good job, Tommy. You proved me wrong, and keep doing it though. I mean,
right. And to your, I'll just add this, Eric. To your point, it's the level of competition I think has something to do with it because it's difficult to improve game in, game out when you're not playing great teams. In Arizona, they lost to some bad teams during the Pac-12 season, I think, because they just got bored at times. And then they're facing in the Sweet 16 a Clemson team that they're better than, but they hadn't faced a quality opponent like that in a couple months. That's not going to be a problem this time around. So I think the challenge, Arizona's risen to the challenge. Certainly we always have to remember that half-court heat by Caleb Love definitely helped, and it helped Caleb Love get out of his shooting funk. Mm-hmm. But I think the level of competition in the Big 12 has something to do with it.
All right, that's fair. Okay, that's a good take. All right, let's talk about this one though. Last week, Alijah Arenas committed to USC, and this was a guy that was a legacy. His dad, Gilbert, big time player here. So you kind of raises some red flags about Tommy's high school recruiting. Buy or sell?
Sell that, Eric. I think that's absurd. I mean, first of all, just to back up, I feel bad for kids who have this expectation that they have to follow in their parents' footsteps. That's just that pressure. For Alijah, Arizona might not have been the best fit for him. I tweeted that last week, and some fans predictably responded with, well, how can USC be the best fit? It's a huge mistake, et cetera, et cetera. Well, Eric Musselman's a good coach. Gilbert Arenas played for him in the NBA, so there's a relationship there. And it's the kid's decision. So I think fans just need to get over it. In that particular example, like I said, I feel bad for kids who feel the pressure to be legacies, and they just need to do what's best for them and find out whether it is or not. But no, I don't think Tommy Lloyd has a recruiting problem. You want to talk about high school commits, maybe, but I mean, that hasn't been his bread and butter at Arizona at all. If you look at how many wins Arizona's had in this time here, and he's doing a great job piecing together some American recruits, international recruits, and the transfer portal guys. And as long as the results keep coming how they have been, I'm not worried about it. I'm not worried where Arizona ranks in the year-to-year rankings in any of the recruiting sites. I mean, Sean Miller put together one top 10 recruiting class after another, and they were good more often than not, but they didn't get to the promised land of the NCAA tournament. And I think Obviously the transfer portal now has, that's changed things, and Tommy Lloyd's got the connections to international players, and I think it's fine. Tommy's not done yet. He's still got a couple more guys he could add. So I understand the frustration, especially with a guy that a lot of Arizona fans were counting on coming to Tucson. But that is the last thing I am concerned about.
Okay. All right. Fair. I'm going to put this one on pause because I want to wait and see what happens with Braden Burries and Koa Pete.
Yeah.
And if he fails to land both of those, I think it's a major problem. I believe he will get at least one. Seriously, I think if you fail to land your top 3 targets, at Arizona, you got a problem. Got a problem?
Maybe, but you think about on this team, as far as American high school recruits, the one guy who's playing significant minutes is Carter Bryant. Most of the guys are transfers, and a couple of them are international guys, and that's it. And that's okay. I don't like lean on transfers as much as Arizona has, and they did kind of luck out with Caleb Love because he was originally going to go to Michigan. But when you keep producing teams that go in the tournament as a 1 seed and a 2 seed, and Arizona's look like they're primed to be maybe a 4, give or take, so far this season, and they may improve on that. I don't really care how you get there as long as you get there.
Okay. All right. That's fair. Show me what happens after these next 2 guys commit in the spring, and then we'll go from there. Number 3, Shane, on Saturday. I mean, I was there in Tempe. I watched Bobby Hurley have a meltdown. It was an absolutely pathetic, embarrassing response that I thought showed that Bobby was at the end. He knows his time in Tempe is expiring soon. And I think obviously losing to Kansas State after being up 18-2 probably will, go back to that, probably extends that. With that said, number 3, Shane, as ridiculous as Bobby Hurley's actions and comments were, it's good for the rivalry. By yourself.
Yeah, like I said on X, I got to chat with Bobby Hurley a few times while I worked at ABC 15 in Phoenix. I actually hosted a Facebook Live Q&A with him his second year at ASU. That was the year before they went up to number 3 in the country. He's always fun to chat with. I enjoyed telling him about how much I didn't like Duke back in the day because of Christian Laettner, which he thought was funny. Nothing to do with him. It was Christian Laettner, like everyone felt. So I respect him, even though, and I like him just on away from the court, even though I understand why most Arizona fans don't. I get it, but I got a chance to get to know him a little bit, and he's always been good to me. With that said, I'd have a problem with anything he said post game, except for the very last thing. He had a few minutes to cool down, compose himself, answer some questions that weren't related to what happened at the end of that game. And then he went out of his way to make that comment, presumably about Caleb Love and not voting for him for all Big 12 at the end of the year. I thought and still think that was immature, it was vindictive, and it was not becoming of a head basketball coach. Some coaches like Tommy, when he called out the team a couple months ago, they say things strategically to motivate their team and light a fire under them. First of all, Tommy would never say that publicly about an opposing player. And number 2, there was no motive for Bobby Hurley here. He was just upset and he was venting, and that was it. But to your question, yeah, I'll buy that the comment and his refusal to shake hands after the game. Yeah, it's good for the rivalry, even though you can argue it's still not much of a rivalry in terms of results. I mean, he's 4-16, I think, against Arizona, not counting the game that he lost when he was with Duke. But Bobby got everyone riled up in year 1 when you remember he talked about having to go to effing Tucson to win a game in the state of Arizona. And then Wildcat fans, including the Zona Zoo, love giving him a hard time each time he comes to McKale. So from that standpoint, yeah, it's fun, and it adds a bit of flavor to a rivalry that isn't nearly as even historically as the football rivalry is.
I think I don't even know where I want to go with this one. Bobby Hurley, I'm sure, is a nice guy. He was my favorite player growing up. Yeah, I liked watching him at Duke, and I've said that on this podcast before. Yeah. His actions are embarrassing. They don't make the rivalry better. I'm not looking forward to the game on March, 3rd or 1st or whatever it is, anymore because of what happened. ASU, he's an embarrassment for ASU, the way he handled that the other day. Act like, we would always bang, announcers and skeptics would always bang on Rich Rod or Mike Stoops for their, sideline tirades. And it was a little bit unbecoming, okay? Bobby Hurley takes it to another level. You have Tommy Lloyd who's like chilling, and Tommy Lloyd gets fired up. Don't get me wrong,
But
Bobby
selectively. Yeah.
throwing off his tie in the first half, it's just garbage, Shane. It's not. It's like he's trying to put on more of a show than his players, and
Yeah.
I hate that. And for a basketball coach who is more who you, I mean, this is like, come on. I understand you get upset. But he's trying. It's like Bobby Knight once did. Like you're trying to put on more of a show than your players, and that's an embarrassment.
But I tend to agree with you. I think that the tolerance level for it is directly proportional to how much winning you get. Bobby Knight won at Indiana, so
Hmm.
everyone put up with it. The fans put up with it. The athletic department put up with it. Bobby Hurley, we'll have to wait and see. They have a new athletic director. We'll see what happens there. I personally enjoyed this era just because it's added some spice to the rivalry. I agree with you on. I mean, like the beginning of his press conference, he talked about, the Arizona fans were chirping, or the Arizona players were chirping a little bit, and he's defending his players. I have no problem with that at all. It was that last comment, and then, the handshake and the handshake thing at the end. It looked like, I don't know, Bobby was one. There was no lip reading. I wish John Boy would do something about it so we could see the lip reading on it, but I don't know if it was just him like being upset and say, "Screw this, I'm not going to shake your hand," or if he actually told Tommy, "Well, let's just leave the court and leave it at that." I don't know which one it was, but Tommy definitely handled himself much more maturely in the press conference than Bobby is, which is easier to do when you win. But if you're a head coach in college basketball, you should be able to handle yourself maturely, win or lose.
Absolute and utter nonsense. And Bobby Hurley will not be Arizona State's basketball coach next year.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm gonna say that
Bold prediction.
rather confidently that
Okay.
Bobby Hurley. In fact, I'm even going to take it another level. I think if ASU does not win games over the next few weeks, he will be fired before they play Arizona again.
We'll have to wait and see. I guess the question is, can ASU get someone better? I mean, ASU has
Yeah,
been
absolutely, they can get
maybe
somebody better.
they've been better under Bobby Hurley than Herb Sendek and Rob Edmonds before that. That doesn't. I mean, that they're usually a bubble tournament team, which is an improvement for them. It is,
Yeah,
but I do
hold
think
on.
he tends to recruit better than he's coached. But go ahead, go ahead.
No, I mean, that's exactly, you said it right there. He's bringing in the right talent.
Yeah.
If Tommy Lloyd had Bobby Hurley's talent, Tommy Lloyd is winning multiple
Can you
tournament
imagine
games.
what Tommy Lloyd could do with Jaden Quaintance? Because he's
Yeah,
really impressive around the rim.
yeah. I mean, he posterized Vasar. I got to
He
give
did.
Vasar credit, by the way. Vasar came back and had two thunderous dunks after that. Some guys
Yeah,
would get down on that, but Vasar really kind of stepped up
that
and
was a good
kind of
battle.
manned up there. So
Yeah.
I got to give him props for that. But what Tommy Lloyd would do with Bobby Hurley's players, and I'll tell you what, every ASU fan that I talked to would agree with that statement.
Yeah.
Every single one.
Yeah.
They agree. Hurley can bring in players, no doubt about that.
Yeah.
The fact is, what can he do with them?
Yeah.
Last thing I want to talk about for basketball now. Arizona scheduled a home and home with UConn starting next year, and apparently there's another big name opponent that they're in talks with a home and home about. Do you buy or sell this scheduling formula is better than these preseason tournaments?
It's a good question, and I had never really thought about the side by side comparison, but I'm going to buy that. I like the home and home over the preseason tournaments because, well, first thing, if you host, you get to have all your fans there, as opposed to maybe a couple hundred who can afford to make the trip to Hawaii or the Bahamas or whatever. So it makes for a great atmosphere even when you're watching on TV. And when you're on the road, even if you're on the road, it's a true road game experience, which I think toughens you up. It's been good for Arizona having to, I mean, Arizona having to travel to a great place, like a tough place to play, like BYU and Texas Tech, and soon they're gonna have to go to Fog Allen and Hilton versus going to Cal and Stanford, where it's maybe 25% full. I think that's great. Um, I just think it's more compelling to watch a game even on TV when you have thousands of fans at full throat rooting for one team versus a couple hundred. So yeah, I prefer that. I love that Arizona continues to build tough non-conference schedules, even when they struggle, like they did this year, because without that, Arizona might not have grown the way they have so far during Big 12 play. And the other thing is it takes the guesswork out of it. You might look at an 18 tournament and think, oh, we get to play these three great teams, and then it doesn't work out that way, and you only play maybe one good team. This way, UConn's going to be good as long as Dan Hurley sticks around. They're going to be good the next couple of years, and I like that kind of format. I think it makes for more drama and it's more exciting both in person and on TV.
I would agree with that. I'm not a fan of, playing. Arizona should never play in the Bahamas again.
No kidding.
They shouldn't. I mean, right. The two times they've been there have not been great. the Maui's okay. These other ones, fine. But I'd rather these one-off games that are big signature games that will get you marquee exposure. Arizona Duke, Arizona Wisconsin, Purdue last year, Florida Atlantic last year, Alabama, UCLA. Tommy's got the right idea. I'm not going to whine about scheduling again because this conference is just, I mean, every weekend, Shane. I mean, I think
it's
Arizona
a freaking
has
gauntlet. Yeah,
it is an absolute gauntlet, and I complained, for those of you who've been with us long enough, about the was it late 2023, the scheduling, the preseason scheduling before the Pac-12. In hindsight, I mean, it made sense. Arizona played better in the tournament. Let's see if this is reflective, if playing these tougher teams has Arizona more ready as compared to like in 21-22, or sorry, 22-23, when they lost to Princeton the first round after playing nobody for months.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, the Big 12 is what the Pac-10 used to be. Back again, I've said this so many times, but 97, Arizona won it all. They finished tied for fourth in a 10-team conference in the Pac-10.
Yeah.
That's how good the conference used to be. And now they're playing in a conference that's just about that competitive again. And again, it's not going to immunize Arizona from having one bad game, just one horrible shooting performance. It doesn't make them immune to that kind of thing, but I do think it gets them more ready to play better competition and the kinds of teams that they're going to face the deeper they get in the tournament.
Certainly can't disagree right now. I want to remind you that Wildcat Country is brought to you by our friends at Harrah's Auction Casino. If you have nothing going on for the big game on Sunday, check out Harrah's Auction. Harrah's Auction, easy for me to say. Their game day on Sunday, 4:30 p.m. at the event center at Harrah's Auction Casino. Everyone's invited. Come enjoy the game and a winning game day spread, including wings, hot dogs, hamburgers, and more. Event entry is complimentary, and you can purchase an unlimited food package at Ticketmaster.com. So check out our friends at Harrah's Auction. Just looking for somewhere to go watch the big game? It's a pretty darn good place. I'm sure some big screens. And by the way, you can walk next door to the casino and bet on it, which, I'm kind of in favor of. Considering, I like a little thing about sports betting. All right, coming up next, Joe Lopez from the Texas Tech podcast makes his debut on Wildcat Country with Shane and myself. All right, Shane, it's time to welcome on a new guest to the show, but you've actually been on his podcast before, so it's nice to have Joe Lopez from the Tortillas Takes podcast covering Texas Tech athletics join us here in Wildcat Country. All right, Joe, we talked about this off air, but Texas Tech seems to be ruining everything good for Arizona. We'll talk about football later because there's more connections there too. But I just want to point out that Arizona seemed to have things on track for football, and then you guys beat us and things go to hell. And then basketball, Arizona's won 12 of their last 13. But who's their only loss? Texas Tech. But it's revenge time on Saturday night. I mean, your thoughts on what you've seen from Grant McCasland and his team. Have they exceeded your expectations, or were you thinking, hey, this seems pretty good? They're living up to what I thought they'd be.
Just to kind of piggyback on that football deal, we're one punch out away from this not even happening. Let's just call it for what it is. If Jacob Rodriguez doesn't punch that ball out, we don't know what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Y'all are driving, so
Arizona would have gone and won the Big 12 instead of ASU.
Yeah, right.
And it's completely alternate timeline where everything goes the way we hope it would.
Yeah, I wouldn't go that far, but you know what I'm saying. But yeah, man, Coach McCasland's great. I've actually been able to spend a whole lot of time with this basketball program over the course of the last 2 years. Been able to hang out with the coaching staff from top to bottom. With exception to Linder, because he's the new guy and I haven't been around the basketball program as much this particular year. But Coach McCasland is top tier. If you look at his resume, he wins everywhere he goes and he gets better as each season goes along. So my general consensus and expectations for this basketball team were fairly high. I had us top 4 in my preseason poll of where we would ultimately finish up with, just because I'd seen the work they put in the last 2 years. I've seen the players that were coming in and the culture change. That term is always kind of underutilized sometimes, whereas like the culture around this basketball has changed and has gelled with Coach McCasland and his staff to take this team and this university to new heights. And man, we're riding a high right now. It feels good to get that national notoriety again, to be in the top 25 polls, to actually have cameras and people looking at Lubbock, Texas, as Texas Tech as a potential dark horse to make a run in the tournament and potentially to make a run in the Big 12. But yeah, I had a feeling we were going 20. My guess was 24 wins this year. We're at 18 right now, so we're holding pretty true to what I was thinking where we were going to land.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are thinking, the top five in the Big 12 was the four teams that are in the top five right now, but then Baylor instead of Texas Tech, and the Raiders have been outstanding. Joe, before I get into anything else basketball related, I got to ask, what's the deal with the saguaro cactus thing? It doesn't grow anywhere near Lubbock or anywhere in Texas, I believe, for that matter, unless people are growing it in their yards or whatever. How did that become a thing? Is there a story there?
There is actually a story there, and it actually goes back to your familiar foes in Arizona State. TCU had a coach at one point in time a couple years back, and Tech was pretty heavily involved. This was right when the Matador Club came out. Paying every player, every student athlete $25,000 for just being a student athlete. If that's on scholarship or just a preferred walk-on or a walk-on, you were getting $25,000. And some guy from TCU said, yeah, well, y'all have to give y'all's players money because y'all can't recruit to that desert. That was what was said. And whenever that was said, Coach McGuire just retweeted what he had said, and he used the cactus emoji, which was the saguaro. And, it instantly caught fire after that. And now that coach went from TCU, and now he's a coach at Arizona State.
Oh, go figure. Yeah, it's funny how things work out. Our defensive coordinator now used to coach at Arizona State and talk trash about U of A all the time. So funny how we know what that actually makes sense, and I'm glad to learn the story there because we all those U of A fans post on hey that it grows in the Sonoran Desert, not there. Anyway, got that out of the way.
Absolutely.
Great story.
Yes, sir.
So I'm interested in how basketball is perceived in Lubbock, because in Tucson, I mean, we're a basketball school. And I live in the Phoenix area, Eric and I do. So we're kind of in Sun Devil country where it's definitely more of a football school. Texas Tech is, because I mean, I don't think their brand is as hot as Arizona's. We might agree on that, but yet they almost won the national championship a few years ago. Arizona hasn't been to the Final Four since 2001. Is Texas Tech a football school first, or is basketball kind of in the mix?
I would say it would be neck and neck. I mean, obviously the donors and all of the money that gets put into this university is going to go towards that football program first and what Coach Joey McGuire's done. And if you guys have been watching the transfer portal news, like the United
cleaning up in the portal,
it's kind of like a do or die all in scenario. Cody Campbell, one of our biggest donors, owns an oil company down here in the Midland, Odessa area. So he does pretty well for himself. And somebody had tweeted something to him about go buy us an offensive line. And he tweeted back to that, I will. And then all of this stuff kind of manifested. So I would say football is going to be first, and then basketball is going to be a close second. I mean, Coach McCaslin and Coach McGuire have a really good bond. Also, a little side note, Coach McGuire was on the hiring committee that did go out and look for Coach McCaslin whenever that head coaching position was available after the departure of Mark Adams. So they're real close, but I would say football's still number one, but basketball's a close second.
Let's talk about basketball for a second. And we're gonna get to football. Don't worry, we got that on the. Yes. I have things I want to say. So your second leading scorer, JT Toppin, almost 15 points a game behind Chance McMillan. Interesting story in that you got him in the transfer portal from New Mexico, and I didn't really understand why New Mexico didn't pay up, and somehow he ended up at Texas Tech. Just the impact that he's had on your team this season. What can you tell us about JT Toppin?
Man, back-to-back years where Coach McCaslin was able to swipe away the Mountain West Conference Freshman of the Year. First in Darian Williams from Nevada the previous year, and then JT Toppin with New Mexico this last year. JT Toppin actually does have some ties to a current player on Texas Tech's roster in Jazz Henderson. They went to high school together in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area, so they were really close and acclimated, really close friends. Best of friends by the hip, by all accounts. And also with Coach Buffington, which is our general manager of the team, who was also heavy in the AAU scene in the Dallas-Fort Worth Metroplex area as well. So whenever those two kind of combined, Texas Tech came calling. We didn't know he was on the fringe there for a while because he was going through that entire NBA process, and he was looking like he may be in that second round kind of graded basketball player, but he ultimately decided to opt out, and he did come on with us. But he's a double machine. I mean, he's a monster on the boards. He's 6'8", 6'9", but he plays way bigger than that. He's deadly with his left. I mean, he makes everybody around you better. Whenever you have that guy that garners that much attention down in the post and you have all these shooters around you, I mean, that makes for a very efficient offense, not just nationally, but also in the Big 12. So JT Toppin's addition to this basketball team has been nothing but remarkable, on top of some of the other pieces that we've already had here, the Chance McMillans, the Darian Williams, and then also in the transfer, Elijah Hawkins coming over from Minnesota.
I want to ask you about your perception of Arizona, in that when these two teams played in the middle of January, Arizona was down 5 and there were a few minutes left, and Anthony Del Orso took a wide open three-pointer and missed it. And then Arizona didn't score the rest of the game, and Texas Tech won the game by 16, something like that. Just your thoughts on Arizona and how Texas Tech matches up with our Wildcats.
I think that's kind of an interesting game. If you go back statistically looking on how this game actually played out, I mean, both teams shot horribly from the field. You guys, I believe it was like 30% from the field and 16% from beyond the arc. You had a bunch of players. It seemed like a 6-man rotation going up against our 8-man rotation at certain points and times of the game. You get winded there. The Big 12 basketball, just Big 12 or basketball in general, man, it takes a lot out of you. And if you don't have that depth and those pieces there, I mean, it starts to show, especially late in those games. Texas Tech did the same thing previously to the Kansas State Wildcats in Manhattan towards the end of that game, where they shut them down for the last 5.5 minutes of that game. Darian Williams and company were able to take over that game and, solidify that victory in Manhattan. Similar case whenever you guys came to Lubbock, that last 5 minutes of the game, we started biting down. You guys were looking kind of winded. We were banging in the trenches for a while, with the rebounding. And I think that's ultimately what got you guys. I mean, the disparity in the rebounding, 50 to 26, I think, or 34.
A lot
50,
to not enough.
Yeah. And in the second chance points opportunities, you guys had 5 second chance points. We had 15.
Yeah.
You're losing the rebound battle by 16, and you're losing the second chance points by 10. And, that's not really recipes to win. You guys also had 10 turnovers, which is great for the Big 12. I mean, you guys played very well, scored a lot in the paint, but you guys just couldn't find the net, from anywhere on the field, it seemed like. But, I thought that game was going to be a whole lot closer. I did predict Texas Tech win, but my prediction was like somewhere like 4 to 6 points there, that spread.
Yeah, well, I also picked Arizona to beat Texas Tech by a touchdown in football before the season started. So let me ask you about, because last week, Joe, I felt like Arizona's win over Iowa State, as crazy as it was probably the best win of the week. And then a few days later, JT Toppin gets ejected early in that game at Houston, which I still think is the best team in the Big 12. And then they go on and find a way to win in overtime. Your reaction, because I know John Boy did a whole thing about it. Was it an intentional kick to the groin, or was it not? Your thoughts on watching it when it happened, and just the Texas Tech being able to win a game like that without one of their top players?
We've talked about this in length about everything. I know the rule book states anything in that nether regions area, it's going to be called. Yeah. I think there's a little bit of a gray area where you should make some, just a sensible decision on intent. But I know intent's hard to just see. You're like, oh, I don't know. Did McCaslin draw up a play called kicked in the nuts, with Toppin, like it was? But a big point of that actual play, I don't know if you guys have seen the replay. I know it was everywhere for a while there.
Yep.
But if you see the pass that went to McMillan from Toppin, McMillan had the same exact motion with the pass whenever he hit Elijah for that 3. His leg went forward. There just wasn't anybody in front of him. And it was like, you got it twice in in one sequence, but you only called it once, and then you kick a guy out 5 minutes into the game. I was just as upset as Coach McCaslin was. I was just, in my residence screaming, yelling, profanities, probably more than what Coach McCaslin was. But as far as all of that stuff goes, you go in, you have a hobbled Darian Williams. You're out Kevin Overton, a big bench contributor, and then you're out your head coach. Not a recipe for victory under any circumstances. More or less one of the best teams in the nation in the Houston Cougars at the Tortillas Center.
Yeah.
And this all kind of just goes back to the culture that Coach McCaslin's built here. You saw him running back to the huddle, getting in every one of his guys' face, hitting them on the chest, letting them know, let's go, we could do this. And that was just about as inspirational of a win that I've ever seen with my own two eyes that Texas Tech has been a part of. But I mean, if you look at the game in whole, you take the W, all the chips were stacked against you. It kind of just opens up, if the deck is against us, that we could still hang with some of the best teams in the nation.
Yeah, amazing win, and put the rest of the country on notice, and the rest of the Big 12 on notice for sure if they hadn't been already. I know we're going to get into our predictions here soon, Joe, but just from an Arizona perspective, in order for Arizona to get over the hump and beat Texas Tech on Saturday, the Wildcats, in your opinion, have to do what?
Rebound. I mean, that's just as easy as it gets. They have to get rebounds. I believe it was Toby, how do you say it? Waka?
Toby Awaka, yeah.
Awaka. He had 14 rebounds. He needs help. Just needs help. He had the most rebounds whenever you guys came to Lubbock, kept some plays, in motion, but offensive rebounding and then just rebounding in general. I think the shots are going to start to fall. I don't think you really get a repeat performance like that, consecutive games against the same opponent. You guys have been shooting the ball well. Caleb Love is playing a little bit better than he had played whenever you guys came to Lubbock.
Since that half-court shot, he's been a different guy, yeah.
Exactly. So I don't expect him. And then there's always the Zona Zoo, which I think is also one of the most underrated places that isn't talked about in the Big 12 because everybody goes to the Hilton, everybody goes to Allen Fieldhouse, even the USA and Lubbock to an extent, and you guys are kind of left off of that tougher places and atmospheres to play in. And I think that's going to go a long way. It's a late tip off with the change now for the Luka Doncic thing with the Lakers. But, I think the rebounding is going to be what is going to propel you guys. And then if I had to put a 1B right next to that, it'd be the bench play and then like KJ Lewis, because he also had a pretty not KJ Lewis kind of day whenever you guys played us here.
It's great analysis, man. You know your stuff. This is great. I appreciate you coming on with us. Now you're going to make picks with us in a second, but I want to transition with a couple of football questions. Arizona hired a former Texas Tech quarterback in Seth Dagey as our offensive coordinator. What can you tell us about Seth? We know what he did at Marshall, and we know he's a Mike Leach protege. What can you tell us about Seth Dagey?
Good question, Eric. Good question.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at like the body of work, then take like an Eric Morris kind of deal of trajectory of how he went along the coaching guidelines, Washington State. Then he went and he took a program in some little small town or some little school in San Antonio. I believe it was called Incarnate Word. Turned them into a powerhouse. And then he went on to North Texas and making that offense prolific. Just think Seth Dagey, the 2.0 version of Eric Morris. Innovative. He thinks on his feet. He's outside the box. A lot of motion, a lot of guys moving pieces. And with a mobile quarterback like Fafita coming back, I mean, I think this is, an area that Seth Dagey is going to be able to exploit some matchups as far as the air raid concept that he runs, like the Mike Leach-esque kind of offense. But it's going to be fun. I look forward to it.
Unfortunately, we don't play you guys this year, but you talked about the expectations with Texas Tech football. And you guys, I know it's early, it's, February, but we're already talking about, big things for Texas Tech next year. How good are you feeling about Joey McGuire's team in 2025?
My expectations are pretty high this year because, this is the year 4. So this is all of McGuire's guys. There's no no guys of the Wells era left on the team. I think you get one guy back in Bryce Ramirez because of some kind of medical red shirt, but that, I don't really consider that like a big contributing piece, but he'll be on the football team. My expectations are probably my floor is 9-3. Like that's the floor for this
Wow.
football team right now. I think they have a pretty favorable schedule. We have 7 home games, so I mean, you only have to win 2 on the road if you just hold serve at home. So 9-3 is going to be my floor. I think you could get to 11-1, 10-2. I don't know if you necessarily run the table and go undefeated at 12-0, but I think you have the pieces there on the offense, on the defenses. You addressed the big concerns in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I think this is a make or break. They went all in as far as transfers go, getting some big names to Lubbock, Texas. And I think, it's going to have to show on the field because, a lot of donors put up a lot of money to get these guys here. So now if you get the guys here and you're unable to perform, now it kind of starts looking like a coaching issue and not a player issue.
All right, fair enough. Well, obviously wish you guys the best of luck. A pretty good
Likewise.
team. I like Joey McGuire as a head coach. Fun hire from the high school ranks there, and he's done a nice job. So good luck to you guys. But we got to make some picks, and we're gonna switch it up. And instead of doing this in the third segment, we're gonna do it in the second segment. Shane, I'm gonna start with you. Give me a Big 12 unranked road win this week, anywhere in the conference.
Well, did Cincinnati just win? Because we're recording this on a Wednesday night. I was going to take BYU over Cincinnati, and I still will, but I think Cincinnati actually just won a game. Did they not?
I think so.
Pull it up right now. Yeah, they just won at UCF, so I'm not feeling as good about this as I was when I put it together earlier, but I will take BYU over Cincinnati. Bearcats were ranked when they played Arizona. It was a long time ago. Now, I mean, that win is barely hanging on as a quad one win at the moment. I think BYU is still a tournament team, maybe the best team. I would say the best team in what I would consider the second tier of the Big 12 outside of the top 5. So I'm going to take BYU to bounce back from Tuesday night's game and win on the road.
All right, so I'm going with ASU. I hate to do this, ASU over Oklahoma State because I don't think they're very good. Oklahoma State's very good. Joe, what do you got for us?
I was kind of in that same boat, but just to for sakes of whatever, I'm going to call an upset. Kansas State over Kansas.
Okay.
Oh, all right. We'll give the. I mean, that's fair. I like that. I mean, Kansas State playing good ball, so we'll take that. How about your non-Big 12 or ranked team that's going to go down this week, Shane? Who you got?
I am going to go with Iowa over Wisconsin. Badgers are only 3-4 in true road games this season. Iowa played Purdue pretty tough at home earlier this week. Hawkeyes really need a win to stay in the NCAA tournament hunt, so I'm going to go with Iowa for the upset.
All right, Joe, give me one team that outside of the Big 12 that's ranked that's going to get knocked off. You gave us Kansas. Who else?
Indiana over Michigan is my
Oh,
call.
wow.
I think Indiana's they're playing at home. Woodson made some interesting comments the other day about the entire team and things like that. I think this is a bounce back game for them. Get him kind of off of I don't know necessarily if it's a hot seat, but give me Indiana over Michigan.
Former Wildcat Umar Ballo.
I was gonna say that's what Umar Ballo will do for you. Getting paid $1 million at Indiana. All right, let's preview the game. Saturday night, 8:30 in Tucson. I think that's what 9:30 Lubbock time.
Yeah,
is that right? Fun. Are we on the same time?
Yeah, no, we're now. Yeah, now we're still. This is fun, Joe, because we're an hour behind you right now. We'll be 2 hours behind you again in a month or two, unless Trump does away with daylight savings time. But for now, Arizona's kind of in a world of its own.
All right, Joe, I'm gonna give you the first pick. I want to know who's gonna win and by how much.
I have a relative who works in the Phoenix area at the local CBS station, the KPHO Phoenix. He's worked there for over 30 years. Wow. My cousin is a Arizona grad, and he has hit me full of banter the last 24 hours about what's going to take place in Tucson in revenge to Texas Tech beating the Wildcats.
That's pretty bold.
So this is for my Uncle Gilbert, who's listening because, he's a photojournalist down there in the Phoenix area. I'm calling another Texas Tech victory, a hard-fought Texas Tech victory. Give me Texas Tech 74, Arizona 70.
All right. Shane, I'll go next. That's good pick, and appreciate you. It's an honest pick. You're not off the hook yet. We'll give you one more game after this one, just because it's a Wildcats podcast. Shane, I tell you, as we talked about in the first segment, this is a different Arizona team, and Caleb Love is leading. And what I saw on Saturday in person in Tempe, and what I saw on Tuesday night in Provo, is a completely different team than we saw November and December. It's a different team. Revenge is served. What do they say? Best. I don't know.
A dish best served cold.
Yeah, there. Thank you.
It's an old Klingon proverb, I believe.
Yeah, very good. Well, I'm clearly not that savvy enough to give you that one. But Arizona's getting some revenge here, and I also don't think it's going to be as low scoring. Joe talked about how the teams shot so badly. I think a higher scoring game. Arizona pulls away with free throws. Wildcats by 7. What do you say, Shane?
All right, so I get to be the tiebreaker. Look, all right, so a little long-winded here, but bear with me. Yeah, Arizona's done a great job containing their opponents' top players lately. They held Curtis Jones to 1 for 11 shooting against Iowa State, held Richie Saunders to 11 points, which is his lowest total since BYU's loss to Texas Tech a month ago. By the way, Texas Tech and Arizona are the only two teams to beat BYU on the road so far this year. But JT Toppin lit up Arizona in Lubbock. 20 points, 16 rebounds in just 26 minutes. We talked about Caleb Love needing to play better against great teams, and he's starting to do that. He went 3 of 13 from the field, including 0 of 5 from 3 against Texas Tech, so that's not going to cut it this time around. I think this game comes down to who controls the tempo. Arizona likes to run the floor. Texas Tech is a little more slower and methodical. Arizona's in the top 50 in tempo in both Ken Palm and Evan Maya. Texas Tech is sub 250 in both. They like to slow it down. Tommy Lillard likes to run and gun. And the Red Raiders control the tempo the first time around, and I think that mattered as well. I think this game will be, like you guys said, will be closer and more competitive. I think both teams are playing better than they did when they met a couple weeks ago, even Texas Tech. And Tech just went into Houston without arguably its best player for almost the entire game and came out with a win. And the kicker, Tech is 5-0 in true road games this year. McKale's not an easy place to play, but Texas Tech knows how to win away from home. So I'm gonna lean Tech by a field goal. I'll say the Red Raiders win by 2. And like always, when I pick against Arizona, like I like to do, I hope that I'm wrong.
So one thing I've noticed about Texas Tech, and outside of the Houston win, Joe, is they haven't really. I mean, there's really no ranked wins there. I mean, it's a good resume, but the Houston win takes it to another level. Would you agree with that?
I would absolutely agree with that. I mean, undermanned, you go in hostile environment and you go and put on that performance. And there were some times there where you thought you were going to make a run and, not necessarily blow them out of the water, but you got up on them by 7 to 10 points at 2 different times during the game, undermanned. And, you like to see that, given that you were running with 6 guys and then your 7th guy, a guy who's only seen 20 minutes on the entire year. I mean, that you got to just like exactly what you're seeing. Also, just a side note, I know that we didn't really touch on it a whole lot. Elijah Hawkins, 3-point field goal percentage away from Lubbock is 50% in this 7-game win streak. So I think that Caleb Love, Elijah Hawkins matchup is going to be one to watch and a fun one to watch at that.
All right, one more pick to make, Joe. Do you want to make a pick? Arizona at Kansas State early next week. What do you got?
Give me Arizona. I like y'all's Wildcats better than the purple Wildcats. So Arizona of Tucson in a good game. Coleman Hawkins is a pretty decent player. I don't necessarily like his story or how he went from prolific prep to Illinois and then off to Kansas State, but I think you guys are just a better basketball team. So give me Arizona Wildcats over the Kansas State Wildcats.
All right, Shane, I'm going to take Arizona to win a very close game. I like the way Kansas State's playing. Wildcats by 3. I think they sweep the weekend and go to 12-1 in conference. But then again, I have not been able to accurately pick Wildcat games consistently all year. Just haven't had a pulse on this team. Are you picking Arizona to bounce back, or are they going to get swept this weekend?
Well, I think I've been wrong on 3 of my last 4, but K-State's been playing better. I think they kind of picked Iowa State's bones after Arizona shocked them a few days earlier. They just won at ASU after Jaden Quaintance missed a pair of free throws in the final seconds. But I think whether Arizona loses to Texas Tech or not, I think they'll take care of business in Manhattan. I'll be a little more optimistic on this one than you are, Eric. I'll say Arizona by 10.
By 10. All right. There it is. All right. Well, Joe, really appreciate you coming on. Great insight on that Red Raiders program. You guys have a lot going for you, and you're the kind of the thorn in Arizona's side. So let's hope the Wildcats can get their first Big 12 victory in football or men's basketball over the Red Raiders on Saturday night. But thanks again for joining Shane and I on the program.
Anytime, fellas. Anytime you guys need some help in any department, Texas Tech, I'll be more than willing to talk with you guys.
Discover more Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino.
Hi, folks. Here are your drinks.
Where having fun means racking up reward credits with the Caesars Rewards loyalty program that can be redeemed for food, free play, hotel stays, and more. Not only here in the city of Maricopa, but also at more than 50 Caesars properties coast to coast. From Harrah's Las Vegas to Caesars Palace in Atlantic City. What are you waiting for? Play for All at Harrah's Auction Casino, the official sponsor of Play.
Thanks to Joe Lopez for coming on with Shane and me. That was a fun segment.
Really good insight into Texas Tech, though.
Oh, that guy knows
everything. Yeah.
Yeah, he knows his stuff. Really impressive. We're gonna dive more into this in future weeks. But the Big 12 schedule for football was released. Something that I always look forward to. Arizona did a great schedule video online. Just your initial thoughts. Now we'll have somebody to come on in the next week or two to talk football. I get that. Arizona, Shane, has 5 of their first 6 games at home. Is this a good thing or a bad thing?
Yeah, I'd like to say real quick, Steven Gonzalez and the Digital Gurus there, that they did a great job with that little fake TikTok video they put together. Check it out if you haven't seen it. It's hilarious. 5 of the first 6 at home. I guess I'll say it's good because it'll hopefully give Arizona, a team with a lot of new faces and low expectations. They'll give them maybe some confidence going into the rest of the season if they can win some more of those at home. They got a tough schedule, which I know we'll get into in a minute, but they essentially have a 10-game Big 12 schedule again, even though K-State won't count toward the conference standings again. I like that they have 2 very winnable games to begin the season that will hopefully help them build some confidence and allow the guys to make some adjustments going forward. Well, hopefully winning both of those games, but I'd feel more passionately about it if I was thinking they were a Big 12 contender, but I don't have a problem with them being able to stay at home toward the beginning of the season, even though the end of the season is going to be a challenge, to put it nicely.
All right, so Arizona should be favored over Hawaii. They're going to probably beat Weber State. I mean, Hawaii will be better. Hawaii's better. Weber State. So let's say they start 2-0. You have Kansas State at home. That's kind of the swing game. Mm-hmm. Let's say they lose that. You're not going to win at Iowa State. Home against Oklahoma State. I'll give them that. So you're 3-2. BYU on October 11th. That's a swing game. It's pretty much a must win if you're going to make a bowl game, as far as I'm concerned. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, probably. I mean,
got to start 4-2. Got to start 4-2.
Probably, yeah. But again, you never know what it's going to look like by the end of the season. But yeah, I think them staying home toward the beginning. Normally, I'd be like, I'd kind of rather that be harder toward the beginning of the season. But this kind of team, I'm okay with it.
So I agree with you. Normally, I would rather have it get easier as the season goes along, so the team can kind of work things out. I mean, I think you're 3-3 at BYU. Then you got Houston and Colorado. You got to hope you got a split with one of those road games and go 4-4. Kansas. I mean, that's another huge game if you're going to make a bowl game at Cincinnati, especially in cold weather. That doesn't seem like it's going to be winnable. And then probably, if all went well to make a bowl game, you got to split Baylor, who's going to be towards the top of the conference, and that at ASU, who once again should be at the top of the conference. This is a pretty difficult schedule that does not, I said on our last show of 2024, I said, all right, maybe 6-6. I'll tell you what, this schedule, the fact that unless you start 4-2, you can just pretty much rule out a bowl game. I don't see this team getting that much better as the season goes. I hope I'm wrong, but
no. And I know I'm beating the dead horse, but like I've been saying, Arizona could go 4-8 again next season and end up playing better. Because they have it's tough competition and they lost they got blown out a lot. Maybe you go from getting blown out to losing close games to winning close games the next year. Maybe that's going to be the path. Having to play both of the defending Big 12 championship game participants on the road isn't ideal. I'd be, like I said, even more concerned if Arizona was a real threat to win the Big 12, which I don't think they are. The other thing to note, though, is the perceived level of difficulty now will change throughout the season, as it always does. Before last season, we assumed Arizona was probably going to lose at Utah and beat ASU at home. And of course, the opposite happened. The projected top 2 teams in the Big 12 last year finished as the 2 worst teams in the conference. And the projected last or second to last team won the whole thing. So
100%.
You never know. That game at Houston on October 18th looks very winnable right now. It might not be going into that game, and vice versa for the game at Colorado. You don't know. So not too concerned about it right now for that reason. And of course, the fact that our expectations are definitely significantly lower now compared to a year ago.
It is imperative that Arizona make a bowl game next year. I'm just going to say it 1,000 times between now and next fall, and you have to make a bowl game. Otherwise, the momentum in this program is completely stalled. You think you could say it's stalled now, but then you're sitting at a major crossroads.
At this point, I just want to see year-over-year improvement, and I think with the new coaches, new coordinators they have, I expect that. I expect them to be better. Again, I don't necessarily expect their record to be better, but I expect the team to play better. I don't expect them to get their clock cleaned week in and week out like they did most of last year.
But see, close losses to me at this point, when Brent Brennan has to prove something, doesn't matter. I want you got to win 6 games in the regular season.
I agree. I just think my expectations anyway have been reset to the point where you're probably now on a not quite back to where you were when Jetfish started, but not too far removed from it to where I think you're kind of on a 2 or 3 year plan. It's like, okay, let's at least see some improvement this year, bowl game the following year, and then maybe you'd start contending for a Big 12 championship after that.
If I were to ask you right now, how many wins does Arizona have with that schedule next year? First guess.
4, maybe 5. I think that's really, if it was an easier schedule, and again, it'll change, but if it was an easier schedule, I'd maybe be inclined to say 6, but I think 4 or 5 is realistic.
5 and 7. Just looking at that schedule, looked at it on Tuesday, looked at it again as we just went through it. Looks like a 5-win schedule to me, if that. So yeah, I think we're on the same page. Thanks to Joe Lopez for joining us. Great insight on Texas Tech. Big game this weekend. Big game next week in Manhattan, Kansas. Can Arizona get the sweep like I predicted? We shall see. But hey, it's been fun. We didn't expect this, Shane. A couple months ago, we were not real sure what to expect with this basketball team. Things have gotten fun. Now we got baseball, softball, both ranked inside the top 25. Should be a fun spring for Arizona athletics, and we are glad to bring it every week here on Wildcat Country. So for Shane Dale, I'm Eric Cohen. Thanks for listening. And as always, bear down.